Welcome to Envision Radio from the United Way of Greater Charlottesville and City of Promise, News Radio 98.9, 1070 AM WINA. Price and Mark here in the studio for the last recording of calendar year 2024.
We made it.
We made it. How many times do you think we did the show this year? Out of 52 weeks, we probably did a good 47.
I was going to say upper 40s, 45 maybe. We only took a couple of breaks.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yes.
Couple of breaks. One, like a person got sick here and there.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
That's really good in my opinion.
That is the portrait of consistency.
Yes.
Good. All right, go us. Another year, another quality well of content. That's not important. It's not about us because we are here with Valerie, Gregory. Thank you for joining us here this morning.
Good morning. You're welcome.
On what has been sort of like a bizarrely weathered week. It snowed on Sunday.
Oh, it did snow.
And then it was 60 degrees 2 days ago.
Yes. And 60
what's
supposedly it's a record high, like in the upper 60s is a record high for December in Charlottesville.
I don't like that we are living in an era where we're hearing a lot of this is the first time that this has never happened before.
I heard someone say, I'm tired of living in an unprecedented time.
We keep saying that, right?
I want to live in some precedented time.
I want to live in the precedented times. Yeah, I want people to be like, all right, cool, I've seen that.
Oh, yeah, that seems really familiar.
I've seen that virus before. I've seen that weather pattern before. Cool, right?
Well, please don't count your chickens before your hats because 2025 ain't going to be a precedented year. So you're going to have to strap in.
And then internationally, it's Iceland's what happens when lava meets the ice caps? I'm like, what's going on? What?
Science.
Yes.
Anyway, Valerie, how are you?
I'm good. Good morning.
Pleasure to have you here. Tell so for folks who don't know you or aren't familiar with your work, give folks a little bit of the background. Where you from? How you made it to Charlottesville, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. I'm actually from South Carolina by way of Dover, Delaware. And
common trajectory.
Yes,
sure.
Always. And I actually got to Charlottesville because of a teaching job.
Okay.
I'm a graduate of Hampton Institute.
Shout out to the HU.
That's right.
Yes,
That's right.
HU, now Hampton University. And got a teaching job here and taught at Jackson Via Elementary School for about 10 years.
Wait a minute.
Yes, that's why.
Maybe that's.
Were you there? Were you there in that time frame?
What years were you there?
76 through probably 84.
Okay, no, I was 92.
Okay, not quite.
Okay.
Not quite.
So
you didn't remember your own teacher?
Well, listen, I remember a couple people from, Portland Smith, I remember was there at the time.
Yes.
Belita Page was the principal at the
Correct.
time. Nancy Lambert was so I remember a couple folks.
All of those folks were
I also had
me.
this hilarious moment where, I went back there years and years later. I was in my 20s. And I'm walking around and I'm and they were yep, that's the whole thing. And I was this place used to be huge.
Yeah.
Right? I was
that happens to me too.
I'm where are the other wings? They were nope, you were tiny. It was this is
it is funny when you go back and it's this place was big.
Yeah.
Now it's small.
Yeah, right.
Anyway.
That's crazy.
Yes, but I did teach there.
Awesome.
Took a time off to get my master's degree from UVA, and then went straight into a principalship in Fluvanna County.
Oh, wow.
Right after I finished and was there for about 3 years, and then became the principal of Clark Elementary School for another decade, 10 years. And so then after that, took a little bit of a sabbatical and got picked up at the admissions office at the University of Virginia.
It's like the mafia. You never really get out, right?
You never really get out. And 23 years later, then retired.
Does time fly?
Wow.
Do you
When I tell people, it's
I thought I blinked my eyes. And then I was at home.
It's like I've been doing this longer than both of you
Yes.
all.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Been on
Yeah.
this.
Oh, yeah. Then both of us have
You've been working longer than I've been here.
Yeah,
So.
right. Yeah.
Then you've been on this earth.
Yeah.
And that's when it starts to get a little frightening.
That is so. Let me ask you this: growing up that is a long career committed to education and sort of a couple different versions, but still obviously very much committed to the institution of education. Was that always something you knew you wanted to do? Were there educators in your family? Was that I have found, at least anecdotally, that a lot of either the people who do it the best or the longest, it ain't for the money.
Mm-mm.
So there was something else there. What was that thing for you?
Well, both of my parents were educators.
Bingo. There you go.
Bingo.
But I was determined not to be an educator.
That's
that's
also
how
a pretty
it's
common
also
story,
how
though,
it
right?
is. We're not doing what the parents
We're
doing.
not doing it. I see that work, and I'm not doing that.
Yep.
Believe it or not, I was a trained classical piano player.
Oh, I love
Are
it.
you kidding me?
It's giving Nina Simone.
What?
Yes.
I studied extensively music for most of my life.
No kidding.
From probably about the age of 5 until I graduated. And I was going to like be playing in Carnegie Hall.
Yes.
And I was going to be doing all these things with music and piano, played for churches, did all of that. And when I went to Hampton, that's what I signed up for. But I tell you, you had to practice literally 3 and 4 hours a day in a soundproof.
Yeah, it's a different kind of pressure cooker.
It's a different time of pressure cooker. And everybody was out in the streets having fun.
Yeah.
And I was like, what am I doing?
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
And it's like, I love people. And I mean, my side jobs were always doing like babysitting, working with kids.
Right.
And, just love working with children. And I just like, I got to let it go. I just cannot spend my life in this isolation.
Sure.
And particularly because, I grew up in high school during the integration time, and that was really rough.
Yeah.
Now it's at a HBCU where, like, if I wanted to run for president,
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about people saying, no, you can't do that because, you're not
It's
the
a culture
right
shift.
color.
Yeah,
It's a culture. And I was like, why am I not taking advantage of that?
Yeah.
And I really wanted to, be with my people.
Yeah.
And know what that was like and not have to worry about my color being an issue.
Yeah.
I can't imagine because I didn't like.
Right. Like, what was that? What was that like? What was it like going from? I'm assuming South Carolina was segregated at the time,
Very
as
much.
most of the country was, but especially the South.
Yes.
So what was it like? So I guess there's 2 questions. The one short answer is like, did you ever consider going to music school? Like, was there ever a thought to go to Berkeley, to go to Juilliard, to go to like a conservatory?
No, it was not.
It was not.
Right. And mostly it's because I kept thinking my parents cannot afford that.
Interesting.
Okay. I wasn't, so competitive that I did not want to have my parents kind of invest in something that deeply.
Sure.
And I wasn't really absolutely sure how far I was going to go.
Sure.
I mean, anybody being in the performing arts, it's a luck of the draw.
It is.
There are talented people out here. I am one of
100%.
millions. I do not
Sure.
claim to be the best or the one.
Yeah.
And I really did not want to do that. And high school was very difficult because South Carolina, I was very young. You knew your place,
Sure.
so to say. People were very clear about what they wanted you to be and not be.
Okay.
And my father was originally from Philadelphia. He, too, was an educator. He went to Penn State, one of the first Black to get a master's degree from Penn
No
State.
kidding.
Wow.
And then he got a job in Dover, Delaware. And by that time, I was probably about 7 or 8.
Okay.
And in the North, it was kind of subtle.
Sure. Yeah. Sure.
Everybody
sure,
talk
sure,
about
sure.
that.
It's kind of like,
right.
oh, we finally have arrived.
That's right.
And I love this story. My mother taking us walking downtown to go to Woolworths and thought for the first time we could actually sit at the counter
Okay.
and like get something to drink. It was me and my younger brother. When we got there, the guy was very subtle and said, well, you really can't sit here, but I'll be glad to give you a drink right off to the side.
Right.
And my mother from South Carolina, like, what? What
Yeah.
do you mean? I'm from South Carolina. I know. I'm supposed to be able to sit
That's
at the
right. That's
counter.
right. That's right.
I thought I was
I've read the
gonna come
stories.
out. I
Yeah.
read the
That's
stories.
right. That's right.
What do you mean? And he was she said he was very nice. And of course, we were a little like, why can't we sit at the counter? What's wrong? What's wrong? And she like stood on a corner waiting for a bus, and there were no buses there that we could ride.
Right.
So it was truly a culture shock for her because she just had fought so hard with the Southern racism.
Yeah.
And here she thought she'd come to the North,
That's right.
and it would be a different world.
Yeah.
It was a different world, but very subtle.
Huh.
So that just kind of just made it like, I'm not so sure where we go from here.
Yeah.
But schools integrated when I was in 6th grade. And it was still very subtle, but they do things like leave things in your chair, try to put stuff in your milk. And, they're smiling in your faces and things like that.
Yeah.
And my father, educator, activist. I
Sure.
mean,
Okay.
he was out there
Yeah.
and really kind of fighting for the cause. And my last name was Hazelton.
Okay.
So every time teachers got one of the Hazelton's kids, they were like, oh, we got to really be nice.
Dad's coming for us.
Dad's coming for him. And he
Good.
was a science teacher and a vice principal. And it just was a struggle. But the Black community really supported us. They
Okay.
created like ebony clubs and different things along that line. And so the way the North would deal with the racism in school is like, we're going to have 2 prom queens, a black one and a white one.
I heard that that's how it was. I'm from the South. I'm from Orange County, but I heard it was like the North's racism is essentially like you can have what we can have, but we need it to be separate.
That's right.
In the South, like we don't mind. We don't. In the South, like we don't
right.
mind being together, but you got to make sure you don't have as much as we got.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. We got 2 prom queens,
Yeah.
and 2
That's right,
prom
that's right.
queens, and and it was just always just a lot of, and so I was a little secretary for the guidance counselor in the school, and she was looking at Temple University and other schools that had these really grandiose music programs.
Yeah.
Okay.
And music is pretty big at Hampton as well.
Okay.
And I distinctively remember telling her, I am not going to school with white people.
Oh. Okay.
Bottom line.
Huh.
And she said, but you're so good. And I said, no. I said, I've spent the last 4 years of my life
Right.
competing with everything because of my skin and not my talent.
Yeah.
And I'm not going.
Yeah.
And she says, well, but I said, no. My parents supported it. And they said it's her choice in terms of where she was going to go. So.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: given that, then
Yes.
you land at an HBCU.
Yes.
So what must that have been like? I mean, there's your culture shift right there, right? You go
Yes.
from the South, which is very in your face. You go to the North, it's the same. Is that a Mark Twain quote where history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes? So it's like the same but different.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden you go to, like, now you're in
was
an
amazing.
entirely different
I was
world.
like, I feel like I'm feeling how it felt for you through you, and I feel like it was the best. I'm regretting all my choices.
It was amazing. I mean, we had the range of black people financially,
Sure.
economically. We had the range of black people because of the shades of the color of their skin, which, sometimes can also be an issue.
That's right.
And it was wonderful. I mean, I could get up in the morning, go to class, and know that everybody sitting there is equally talented.
Yeah.
And I do not have to worry about a teacher or professor looking at me and wondering, like, can you do this? Did you deserve to be here? We all deserve to be there.
Yeah.
It was fabulous. I always say it was
you
probably.
were like having a moment.
Well,
over here.
so I applied to Hampton, and I got in, but then I got into the University of Virginia, which was my dream school. Not only was it my dream
What?
school, the University of Virginia.
Oh, why'd you say it
yeah.
like that?
University of
Everyone
Virginia.
knows you went to UVA.
Yeah, I don't know. That's
Like you
UVA.
said the University of Friendship.
Oh,
I was like,
friendship.
what?
I guess.
Yes.
But yeah, I got into Hampton, and UVA was my reach. So like when you apply to a reach, it's like,
Sure.
oh, I might not get it. I can't count on that. Like I hope so.
Yeah.
But I need to be thinking of viable options for myself. And so I was gonna go to Hampton, and then I got to UVA like last minute, and I was like, oh well, I love that. I was gonna send my check, but
Was that your last two?
yeah, I was gonna go to Hampton. I wanted to go to Hampton. I mean, I thought it would be great.
Yeah.
People always told me that I probably wouldn't fit in, only because I came from a really white country background. Like I was just very little of us at our school. So it was like, yeah, you should go to UVA if you get in, because that'll be like a perfect like demographic like equivalency of where you're from.
Right.
And you should probably go to a demographically equivalent of where you came from, where it's going to be a bit of a shock,
Yeah.
and you don't know how you'll transition well. I was like, well, great, that's my dream school. I'll just go ahead and go down there. Well, great. But what I realized, it's funny, is that because my high school didn't have a lot of people that looked like me in my classes, that when I got to UVA, 6% felt like 100%. I tell people,
There's so many people in there.
I was like, y'all said there weren't no black people here. All I see is black people. Okay, I was like, oh, dang. They said it was going to be just like my high school. I only saw 2 of us. Well, now I see 22 of us, and it feel like everybody.
There you
know.
go.
And so
There you go.
even from a person that came from a really historically white area, country area, farms, outweighted people, it was still very shocking to see black people who look like me at college, just there, educating themselves. And so, I was like, well, I told somebody, I joke all the time, I don't remember seeing any white people at UVA, because I was also in the African-American major. I was like, I didn't see any white people. They said, huh? It's 99%.
That can happen.
I said, I
99%.
don't remember any.
That can happen.
I don't know how. I mean, they said, but you had maybe. I had my peripheral was off. So,
do you, in hindsight, would you? And I'm gonna ask this question to both of you. And given what you know now, knowing what you know now, would you change your decision? You are now. How old are you? 25, 26?
27.
27. You're
about to turn 28.
When's your birthday?
January 24th.
Oh, word.
Less than a month.
All
Yeah.
right.
I would not, and only because I would say that the places you love the most and the things you love, you should be able to critique those things and still love it.
Okay.
And so I was actually in an article. I got interviewed about that after I graduated because I went to work at the university afterwards. They're like, why would you go to a place that you have so many qualms about?
Okay.
I was like, because I love it. As something you love, you want to stick around and make sure that it gets better. And I can't imagine changing anything that I did, regardless of like how cool I think going to Hampton would have been. Like, I loved UVA. My mother went there. My aunt went there. They're twins, so they went there at the same time. Well, no different generations. But I went there, and if you love a thing, and I'm generally from the area, if you love a thing, you're willing to be in the trenches even when it's bad.
People say that a lot about institutions. That's been a lot of the
Yeah.
current political discourse is saying if people abandon the watchtower, you know, people are like, I'm leaving, and people are like, if you abandon the watchtowers, I'm like, what's the point?
Correct.
Yeah,
So-
there was a lot. Was everything great? No.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can name things, a list of things that wasn't great, but
Yeah.
I loved it. I love what it meant to me and what it
Sure.
gave me.
Yeah.
So I do it all over again. Just
So let me
the
ask
same.
you this question in the context of your experience, but also the work you've done, and particularly in which with the Ron Brown Scholars, and I know Mike, and I've known Mike for a long time, and I love that program. So when we think about higher education, right, we think about it's I would argue it's almost less about capability and more about credential, right? Like I have a degree from William and Mary that confers some sort of status on me that I can tell you to your face I don't deserve and didn't earn, right? You know, so similarly, right? We have this. There are those degrees. UVA being one of them. William and Mary, the Ivy League, obviously. That like you come out of that with a different thing,
You do.
right? So, and I've asked this question to a lot of people that have gone to HBCUs. Ty Cooper, my mother went to Norfolk State. Mayor Wade went to Norfolk State. You went to Hampton. So
I didn't know why I went there.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
cool. That's lit.
you know. So, but also,
All the best
okay. So,
people.
given that experience, but also the context of like you have a kid that can go to Yale or Howard. You have vastly different cultural experiences. We can't. I'm not even saying different academic experience, but far different perceptions of the academic experience. Right.
Well,
What is your advice, or what is your sort of wisdom to that student, understanding that one will have a different weight and a different flavor and will be unarguably sort of richer culturally. But if you walk out of Yale with a degree, you can go do whatever you want.
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
Because I also think it's like, what do you do with that experience?
Sure.
Because I do think you can make the best of both. And you really need to kind of search your soul, so to say,
Okay.
in terms of what environment would be the best for you. I've known students in my admissions world that have done a little bit of both. I can remember a father whose son got into Harvard, and he also got into Mahari, and he really wanted to go there. And his dad was like, why would you
not go to Harvard?
Why would you not go to Harvard?
Yeah.
He did end up going to Harvard.
Okay.
And after he graduated, he said, I felt like I missed out on something.
But was it worth it? I
And
think
was
it's the
it worth
question.
it is
what
yeah,
it was
that's right.
saying. Yeah,
That's right.
And he,
Yeah.
he
Too.
wasn't even really sure it was worth it. He did not feel like the doors like opened up so
Interesting.
efficiently there.
Right.
He said, I felt like the only reason why the doors did open up is because my dad and I made best use of the resources that were there
Sure.
to be able to do that. And he says, if you're picking an HBCU, check out the resources.
Sure.
Check out the alumni. Check out to see where they are.
Yeah.
Hey, we almost had a president that graduated from
That's right.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
that's right. Yeah, and I think this is an interesting argument because I think anyone who has either been in education or gone to an HBCU or sort of, like backdoored a public Ivy like me understands that like it is not about what's in there, it's about what people think is in there.
That's right.
Right?
That's so true.
And so I had this argument with my father for a really long time where my father's a career educator and both my parents have more degrees. My wife's got everyone in my family's too many degrees. and but they were talking about it. He was like, you should really think about going back to school and get an MBA or get a da-da-da. And I just kept being like, for what? Like to pay for people to tell me a bunch of stuff I already know to get into the next thing. But it was an interesting argument because his argument was like, yeah, like yes. Like that's how the other thing works,
Yes.
right? That's how it works. And so I find it interesting, that particular argument of if we're arguing on merit, are the schools better, worse, the same? dealer's choice, right? And to your point, depending on what the experience is to be. But I wonder, are we going to be able to change the view of the other side quick enough? Because you look at all these tech companies, they go, I go to Stanford, I go to Harvard.
Yeah.
Period. Just because that's where I know most of the fish probably are.
Right.
So can we tilt that enough so that that kid maybe doesn't go to Harvard?
Yeah.
Because it seems like at the end of the day, when rubber meets the road, like.
But I think it's hard when we live in a society that's very brand oriented.
Yeah.
Yes.
Take it out of the schools.
Sure.
It's about what's on your label.
That's exactly right.
You know, we've gotten to be a very brand-oriented society. And until we stop being a brand-oriented society, it's going to be really hard to change that.
Yeah.
But you also have to remember that, you know, companies like that also know that they can go to AT&T
Sure.
and get a black engineer.
Yeah.
They get
true.
recruited
True.
heavily.
Right. Someone else get them started. And then
Right. That's exactly right.
We don't have to take the big risk.
We don't have to take the big risk. We want to diversify.
That's right.
And, you know, they get huge companies coming in because they happen to have a really, really strong engineering program, so to say. And so companies know little things like that.
Sure.
So, yes, maybe if that kid had gone to Harvard, they wouldn't have to look so hard.
That's right.
But they also know where to go to look in terms of what HBCUs. Because like Hampton right now, their architecture and nursing schools are popping.
Is that right?
Yeah, they put out some fabulous architects and nurses also. And so we may not appreciate that, but the companies out there who are looking for that know, if I want a black architect, let me go over here.
Interesting. So I'm like all over this thing. Are you?
No, yeah.
Okay. There's a lot of threads converging here. So, okay. The architecture thing I think is interesting because I was reading something the other day that said black architects make up some ungodly small number of the field. It's like 2% or 3% or something. So,
are not all the fields like that? Are not all the fields?
Not that. I mean, that's low.
That's low.
That's low.
That's
I mean,
low.
it's you gotta look.
Right.
You gotta hunt.
Too
You know?
much.
And so again, I think the question for you and for both. I mean, I think there's a really interesting argument to be made. I was reading this Cornell guy, John McWhorter, who's some of the stuff he says is a little bit off the wall, but he was making this argument that when companies go to do their DEI work and they try and diversify with a pool that's small, it's really a systemic problem that started way earlier in the pipeline, right? Because so then you have these architecture firms going, hey, I don't know what you want me to do. Like, the pool for the country is 2.5%, 3%.
That's correct.
So I guess, you know, when we think about access to opportunity, right, and you know, you've done work sort of at all levels of education. I mean, is that something that you've been able to plot of like, oh, what's happening at the higher levels are just sort of reverberations of a lot of what's going on younger. And if we don't start to build from the bottom, we're not going to have a lot of black classically trained pianists.
There you go.
Because that just doesn't happen in high school. That started when you were 5.
Right. Exactly.
And you can't just pick, you know, you can't pick that up at that level at 12 and just be like, let me get into Chopin. Like that has to be part of your cultural model.
Right. It is. And when I think about it, like, my mom and them wanted me to start playing the piano so I could start playing for churches.
In church, 100%.
And make money.
Yeah. That I did not expect.
Making money.
You can make some money because you can get on salary and, you know, be 15 and got some money
there
and stuff coming in.
All right.
And never thought my teacher was white, and she only had 2 black students. Out of all the students, she was well known in the city and things like that. And she poured all her energy in on us, the other young lady and myself, because she says, I think I can make you better than just playing for churches.
Really?
And she really poured it into us. And I mean, we were paying for classes, but I got to a point where she would just call and say, what are you doing Sunday afternoon? Come over and let's play a duet together.
Okay.
And we would just sit in her little room and just like play together and have fun because she felt like that had become somewhat of her equal.
Yeah.
And things along that line. So you're absolutely right. And this is the thing I think that sometimes we are missing the boat in the School of Education. You know, the 3 R's are very important. But I always say, but what about the 4th R? And what is that? Resources. And what are we exposing our kids to? Right. In terms of talking about what a career or what's something that you love, you can make a career out of. We don't have those conversations young enough with kids, in my opinion. And I just think we need to be doing, more about finding that talent. And I can remember just even as a principal, the gifted and talented programs, which tends to exist, were very much based on test scores in the 3 bases are. And I had this one young man, African man, who always was in trouble.
Yeah.
But he was an artist like you could not believe.
Yeah.
And I did everything in my power because this was somebody who needed resources to nurture that talent, to be able to take that talent, and whether he became a commercial artist or a famous painter, there was nothing there. And the gifted program kept saying, but, he doesn't have the scores. And I said, it's not about the scores. It's about the resources.
Yeah.
We have a talented. I mean, he was drawing like in first grade.
Really?
And I was like, and it kept him out of trouble. And he would have been someone that would have benefited so much from that resource to say, you are gifted and talented.
That's right.
And it was almost impossible to make that happen.
That's right, because we're like dissecting owl
We
pellets
really
and doing
are.
a whole bunch of other nonsense.
We really are.
I was in that Quest program. We were doing a bunch of stuff. That,
I also was in the gifted
Right,
program.
exactly.
Yeah, I would like to lobby that. I don't think I'm either, but but we didn't. It is true though. There is there is that. I mean, that's an unfortunately common refrain of like. You see the kids that are artists, that are musicians. You see the kids that are banging on tables. You see that, right? And there's no avenue to turn that into, well, hey, what you're really doing is this, right? And what you're actually, this is part of what you, and it is, there is a version of it that is disruptive, but there's a version of it that's very creative.
That's correct.
And I think that there's a huge, I mean, you said it, and we've talked about this a lot about, a lot of the scholastic achievement comes down to what happens outside of the 4 walls.
There you go.
And how do we make that a thing?
Yes.
And I wonder, I mean, in all your time in sort of secondary and at when were you at Clark? I guess Summit now. It was Clark in that day.
Yes. Oh, that's right. They have changed.
Yeah.
It costs a lot of money to change
it. They pretty penny on that. Yeah.
They sure did.
Yeah.
I was pretty much at Clark during the 90s. I went there like in 89, 90.
Okay.
And then left in 2000,
Okay.
2001.
That's a long time to be a principal.
Yeah, it was. And I thoroughly enjoyed it and attempted to change the trajectory of what I wanted to offer my children at that school. And SOLs came into play.
Okay, so interesting. When did that start?
Yes, it was in the early mid 90s is when SOL started. Yes, because one of the things that I had done, because Clark Elementary School at that time was 80% free and reduced lunch.
Sure.
Kids came in and out, and trying to offer some consistency. So I created communities within that school. So when you come in at kindergarten, you already know who your first, second, and third grade teacher is going to be because they work together as a community.
Yeah.
Which also helped break down teachers saying, what did that kindergarten teacher do? Or what did that first grade teacher do?
Right.
They didn't teach
You didn't
them.
teach us get anything.
Because now they had to work together as a team.
That's right.
So you had the third and fourth grade teachers who were also working with kindergarten teachers. And they each kind of had a theme for their teams. Like I had a Spanish team, and those kids were learning Spanish like off the wall. And then I had another and they created like a history team. And then the parents felt like, I want to stay here because now I know consistency, and I know these teachers, and I know that do whatever I can to try to keep my kid in a sustainable environment. And then SOLs happened, and it's like, well, you can't do that anymore because we need all your third graders to be doing SOLs. So, and honestly, that's part of probably the reason I just decided I need to take a break and step back.
Yeah.
Because what I saw was happening with my kids, they were doing well on tests.
Sure.
Because they were all working together.
Sure.
And that team and the communities would have monthly dinners with the families.
No kidding.
And they would come to the school, and they were like a family.
Sure.
So those teachers and those parents and those kids was like, this is me for 4 or 5 years.
That's right.
And I don't have to worry about anything because they're going to look out for me. And that was important to me, building those relationships and things along that line. But when it came time with SOLs and I had to pull back because we had to really teach to the tests. And,
Yeah.
I feel like I hear that a lot, that's the main thing about
that's
SOL.
the main thing it is. It's measuring basic learning knowledge.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
and I said, okay, time for me to step back.
Right.
So when you left there, what was your vision for your path for the future? So did you intend to go back after things to see how it was?
Things cooled off.
Yeah, you was like, this thing ain't gonna last. I already see how the tests look. I give it 3 years. SOLs won't be a thing anymore. So I'll be right back.
Well, it's interesting when I left and stepped back from it. I thought I needed to get into the higher up, the executive part, the not superintendents, but
like the central office,
director of curriculum, and maybe start having impacts there. And then I found out about this. My husband actually saw this job at UVA as a director of multicultural recruitment, and it also had me reflect on what my kids were thinking about in terms of going to college and how early that could even start.
When was that? When does that start, do you think? Or do you know?
I think it starts in elementary school.
Is that right?
Yeah. Because one of the things that I saw, like with the students, when I was at Clark, they didn't have any exposure to anybody. Their goals, let's put it this way, sometimes, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to work at the University of Virginia Hospital.
Right. The horizon is wherever it's been set, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And they were they'd never seen African American young people in suits. They never, and I can just remember showing a picture to one kid reading a story about a wedding, and he didn't know what a second grader, what a bride and a groom was. Just those kind of little exposures and things. And I was going around like, you're going to go to college. You're going to get ready to go, to college. And then I was like, but what does it really take to get into college?
Yeah, sure.
And and sometimes folks get caught up in grades. And, I would have families or people would meet me and say, my kid's a straight A student. Right. He's going to go somewhere like UVA. And I said, well, what kind of classes is he taking? Does that matter? He's a straight A student, And I was like, yeah, it does.
It matters, sure.
It does matter. And all the different pieces in admissions that do matter.
That's right.
And just the misinformation. And I was an educator. I had a young daughter. And I was giving her wrong information about what to do about going into college. And when I got into the admissions world, I was like, whoa, we need to step back and really think about how we start preparing our children as early as we can about the possibilities.
That's right.
It's not necessarily like it has to be the necessity, but it's more about the possibilities.
That's right.
So you have a daughter.
Yes.
And as an educator, how was raising a daughter, knowing the ways in which the education system worked? You got into admissions. You were talking about misinformation. Like, did she, what were you telling her about how education functioned in our society? And where is she now, I guess?
Well,
did she want to be a teacher, a principal?
Well, she never. There were times that she thought she wanted to be a teacher because she was I was an educator, and different things along that line. It was, I think the thing, and I hope the message that I was trying. I want you to make the best of every class, teacher, person who's in the class that you can, to be able to figure out what it is that's important to you.
Sure.
And the education system can provide you that. And my being who I was, people knew who I was.
Yeah.
And it kind of reminded me similarly of what I was raised up, as a Hazelton, and people were like,
sure, yeah.
And one of my best friends,
you're Thomas,
and
how it works for you.
It does.
It's true.
And what that does, I just remember when my daughter was going to kindergarten, one of my best friends was a kindergarten teacher at the school she was going to, and she said when they were divvying up the classes, somebody says, "Who wants this principal's daughter?"
Yeah, that's right. You don't want to be the teacher where
You
all
don't.
the parents are like other teachers and executives.
Right.
Like, I don't want to be doing all that.
Right.
Like,
And her father's a lawyer.
yeah.
So,
No thanks. Yeah. Nah.
And so
good.
she, to some degree, had that advantage, but it also was also very much a pressure cooker for her
Sure.
as well. And we didn't have any kind of like, she said she always knew she was going to go to college since she was in kindergarten. Because, education was important to us. It was told by her grandparents and all that were involved in her life to get ahead.
Mm-hmm.
You got to keep learning. And that's kind of the way we kind of presented it to her, is how you continue to just learn and not necessarily say you have to get this degree, this degree, this degree, this degree.
Sure.
You got to learn and you got to love it. You got to want to do it. She loves to read and different things along that line. And so it kind of happened naturally for her because of who her parents were, so to say, or who her family was, in terms of that as well. But we never stopped telling her, one, you got to take advantage of everything that's going to get there. And two, there are going to be people who are going to try to take that away from you because of the color of your skin.
Sure.
And you need to make sure that you don't let that get in your way. So
I just got to make sure that I got to figure out how we're going to get our sponsor plugs in
Oh,
next year. I'm trying to time it. We don't have it yet. We haven't usually
Yeah.
do this. So I have to say, if you're just jumping in, this is Envision Radio from the United Way of Greater Charlottesville, City of Promise, News Radio 98.9, 1070 AM WINA. Price and Markey, last show of the year. Valerie, Gregory. Keep it moving. Go ahead. Get in there.
No, you just,
Oh, is it my turn again?
No, it was my turn, but I completely lost the train of thought because I was sitting here listening to the. I was like, yes, trying to get it down. I was like, your cadence. And I was like, oh, I forgot.
I still do that. You just have to do the intro. I'll keep the.
Oh, okay.
I'll do the. I'll do the plugs. Yeah. This show is brought to you by. I can do all that. You just got to do the intro. Okay. Well, I do have a question.
Sure.
I am interested in your thoughts on the current state of small DEI, not big, because I think we have, as we do with most things, is we take terms and then we sort of politicize them and cannibalize them, and they get weird and they mean things they don't mean, and blah, 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 blah. But I'm interested in this theory of someone, I think Richard Thaler, some psychologist said that, he said, I don't believe that people are dumb, I think life's hard. And I think that given that, we really have one or two options. We either make the outcome easier, or we give you the resources to meet the challenge. And I think that's something that you said earlier.
Yes.
I would argue that particularly, and when you talk about test scores, right, it seems like we said, okay, we got to do these SOLs. And then we go, minorities aren't passing these SOLs. So then we say, let's change the outcome for this cohort because we can't demonstrate a significantly lower pass rate for this particular cohort of kids. I'm wondering, is that true? Is that cynical? Because what I see sort of anecdotally is not us saying, hey, we're going to give this group enough resources to meet these challenges, to have access to the piano lessons, to have access to the extracurriculars. We're going to say, well, passing for you means something different. Getting a degree for you means something different. So we've sort of moved the goalpost, and then we say, hooray. Right? Look how high our graduation rate is for minorities.
But isn't that like the idea that the reading rate is still not at the graduating level?
That's correct.
Oh, okay.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Like, people can't
right.
read, but we passed more people.
But so we can say we passed more people. And I'm sure you've heard these conversations before,
yeah.
being in publication, where you're like, this kid didn't have but 6 credits in January, and he walked across the stage. And everyone's like, woo. And I think someone, and maybe it's me, it's like, how is that possible?
I know. Yeah.
Like how? Like you went to high school, public high school. I went to public high school. You ran public schools. Like, why was I going to school every day if I could have just done that? I could have just phoned it in for 3.5 years and be like, all right, cool, I'm out. So like, what is that? I mean, I guess the bigger question is, as someone who has worked deeply in public education and who has like run schools and worked with kids and has sort of been on the other side, like, how deep does that go, right? Like how are we in trouble? From a standpoint of saying, like, if we start to peel these layers back, we're going to find a lot that we don't like.
Yes.
And it's sort of our own doing because we've gotten caught in these sort of, the incentives don't align. And the incentives certainly don't align to support the kids and families. They align to sort of maintain the veneer of the institution.
Nope. You hit all the right buttons. And I swear I probably could make $1 million if I knew exactly how to say it. But when I listen to you, I cannot not say we need to continue doing the resources and challenges and those things and stop with all this passing forward in terms of that.
And that's changed a lot.
That has.
Even since your time, right? Because like you're in this thing now where like you can't hold kids back.
Right. Right. But at the same time, it's always like, well, did you do your job to make sure that they got everything they needed?
Sure.
So they wouldn't be held back.
That's right.
And that was a question that I always put towards my teachers.
That's right.
Before you start thinking about kidding, you need to ask yourself first.
That's right. Yeah.
Have you done everything possible to make sure this young person had all the resources and things that they needed? Because that's why you're their teacher.
Sure. Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you have to spend a lot of money. It could be time. It could be really looking deeper. And, some of the things back in my day, is facing is white teachers did not know how to do that with black kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was so much more easier to just pass them on.
That's right. Yeah.
Because they didn't know culturally what they needed to do. And it could be easy as like, what kind of books are you reading them?
Sure.
What kind of things are you exposing them to?
Yeah.
I can remember like you have these standardized tests and they had a picture of a pig.
Yeah.
But the word they were looking for was swine.
Yeah, never.
Right. And I'm like,
don't even talk about Orange County because you're all over
that.
Yeah.
I'm not. I was actually thinking this reminds me of not a Good Times episode with Michael.
Okay.
And obviously Michael's supposed to be the genius in the family, and they give him this test about what kind of job he's supposed to have when he gets older, and they're like, garbage man or something like that.
Sure.
They're like, no, Michael's a genius. Like, they go down there to the office, they're like, what do you know? Michael, he the best one we got? Like, you tell my son he can't go to college because he took this aptitude test. And they look at the test, and the test is like, because African American children use a vernacular that is not populated in school, that they actually do know what you're talking about, but you haven't met them where they are. So it was like a question about what is this thing, or like, and then the guy was like, oh, but this is how we scored the test. Like, he was like, no, Michael knows exactly what you mean. You didn't care that he didn't understand the ways in which you meant it.
That's exactly right.
Right, and so it's this idea, and the, James was like, well, can you pass a black aptitude test? He starts giving the test. He starts giving the test a question. What is Dan DeWano? What's his first name and what does job mean? And the guy was like, what? I don't know. He's like, you would have failed our test because you couldn't pass the test. That meant
there you go.
It's because of the vernacular in which we use it.
Right.
Yeah.
You're not asking the questions right. They actually do know what you mean, but you're skewing the results based on a person's cultural identity.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, context is everything. I'll never forget. My wife told me a story. She used to teach in D.C. for a long time, and she told me a story that, young teachers, she was sending out all the forms, and the forms, like every form that we've ever got, says, get your mom, dad, parent to sign it, and none of the kids had them sign. And she's like, what is going on, right? And it was just something simple, because it wasn't grandma, it wasn't grandpa, it wasn't aunt, it wasn't uncle, right?
Yep.
And so all these kids are like, oh, it's not mom, it's not dad.
Yeah.
So, boop, right?
Yeah.
And it's that thing, though, right? It's something
Simple
that
as
easy.
language.
It's like the kids aren't irresponsible. The kids didn't not do what you asked them to do. They couldn't fulfill that requirement.
There you go.
Right? So they all come back blank.
Right. And to some degree, it's somewhat simple, but it's really about just taking the time to get to know that.
Yeah,
Yes.
but you don't know what you don't know, right? And I think we have this whole thing whereby the majority of educators are white women.
Yes.
And you're not taught that, that's the thing about teaching that's so crazy to me, right? Is that you're not taught that. And we do this thing where we take our highest achieving teachers and achieving as measured by sort of aptitude. And where do we put them?
Right.
In the worst schools. With people they have probably had very little, sort of run, little interactions with, have no cultural context, and we wonder why it doesn't work.
Yes.
We've all seen Stand and Deliver like one too many times, and we're like, why didn't they turn that school around? Why did she only teach for 2 years? I was like, because you sent this girl from UVA to Baltimore County.
There you go.
Like, what did you think was going to happen?
I know.
Just because she has like a high, I don't know
Right.
what the teaching test is, praxis score or something.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that she's the
There you
best
go.
person to go to Baltimore
you
County
go.
Public Schools.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, how do we do that? How do we deal with
We
sort of that
I
thing?
think we just really need to look deeper into the educational system and how we are training and teaching our teachers.
Mhm.
I do think some of that is starting to happen.
Yeah.
And I've seen a little bit of, like up at UVA, to think about what more you need to take in the classroom than the fact that you're good at math or good at
That's
science
right. That's right.
and good at things like that. How do you relate to people?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And how do you relate
Soft
to people
skills, for
from
sure.
That's right. Yeah.
those soft skills, and they are so important. And I would say almost everything I have done in my life has been based on relationship building
Mm-hmm.
and those soft
Especially
skills.
with young people. Like,
Right. Because, just like in admissions, I wasn't just talking to you because of what your application said.
Yeah,
I want to meet your mother.
that's right.
I want to meet your father. Why don't y'all come in?
Yeah.
My boss used to say, your door for an admissions person is like a revolving door.
Right. Right.
People are coming in and out
Mhm.
all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, if I'm going to bring these students of color here, I got to make sure that we can meet their needs.
That's right.
But I also got to be sure that they know they got somebody here that's got their back.
That's right. That's right.
And that will convince people of color, particularly coming to a PWI,
Yeah.
right school, that they might survive there and they can be successful there.
Mhm.
They can love it there. And they could see, what Key was saying, that there are people like here that are like me
That's
and
right.
being successful.
That's right.
So, we need those soft skills. We need that. And we need to, and the unfortunate thing with us just stripping bookshelves.
I was gonna say it's
Sure.
hard. To be, like you
It's
want to be
Sure.
talking about
hard.
retraining.
Sure.
They
Right.
can't even teach. Even if you got the
Yeah.
soft skills,
Right.
even if
That's
you
right.
you know
That's
what, I'll
right.
take a pay cut to go to this place because I have good skills to work with
Right.
underprivileged youth.
Right.
Now you're like, well, I was going to start teaching them, and now they just don't tell me if I teach them anything from this
Mhm.
set of books, I'm fired.
I'm fired. There you go.
I'm fired.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, we're stepping backwards if, it's the only way I could kind of respond to all that's going on. Because every time I talk about it, because the writers in the world, the people who have created these books are perfect for helping all of us to understand each other
Mm-hmm.
and the differences that we are and to appreciate those differences,
Mm-hmm.
not tolerate. I hate when people say, but I need to tolerate. No.
Mm.
You need to appreciate those differences.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to understand that that's the appreciation. It's what's going to help us as a society to be able to get along with each other.
Right.
Don't tolerate my color.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
That's right. That's
So-
right. That's that old, that was that old joke. It was, did you ever watch that interview? It was like Tommy Lahren did an interview with Trevor Noah.
I do know who Trevor Noah is.
I love it.
And she just stepped on like sort of every like bizarre landmine, but the one that sticks out was she was like, I don't see color. And he was
Ooh.
like, well,
Whoa.
That's
he
a
was
bad
like,
one.
Well, he was like, well, what do you do at traffic lights? And she, and of course it's a very glib example, but he was like, you clearly see it, right? Like that's not what we're aiming for here,
Oh, that's
right?
a good one.
That's a good one.
And so, but it's that kind of thing. And I think that the pursuit of, I think it's interesting. And actually, that sort of ropes into a question that like, and this might be a cynical take, but I love both of your reactions to it. Has our pursuit of sort of equity and justice and fairness actually, and I won't say it has hurt our kids because it's definitely been net positive, but I think about the sort of moving the goalpost thing, right? We're saying, look, I'm acknowledging that your circumstances are more difficult. Either it's money, either it's family architecture, either it's substance abuse, housing, whatever it is.
Mhm.
But instead of, and I can't get off of this, instead of saying, I'm going to give you more of what you need to bring you up to level, I'm just going to make the finish line closer. Doesn't that hurt people in the
Yeah.
long run?
I think it definitely can because you haven't defined the finish line.
Right.
And in not doing that, it means you're not understanding the person that you're trying to move to that finish line, if I could put it that kind
Yeah.
of way. And I think you've hit it kind of right on the button, and we keep doing this. Equity. So does that mean you're just trying to make me more like you?
Yeah. Sure.
And that if I can function in this skin like a white person,
Uh-huh.
then I'm equity.
Yeah.
versus maybe we should be thinking about how do you appreciate my difference and know what those differences are, then we're equal.
What does that mean in a world where we have to measure something?
Sure.
Like we have to have some sort of common language. You know, I think about this. I think about this a lot. My dad, who again can sort of wax philosophical, but we always have these interesting conversations where he's like, "Look, laws are just sets of agreements. Like we just agree not to run red lights, and I just trust that you also won't run a red light. We're not communicating that. We're not like, okay, now it's just like we have this whole system that's just sort of like unspoken covenants amongst us, right? But we understand that there are certain foundational elements that we agree on. If X, then Y, right? If you run afoul of this, you get this. How do we live in this kind of space of equity? Like, what can we measure? Like, can we create things where we understand, like, hey, we want all kids, black, white, brown, green, yellow, poor, rich, tall, short, to be able to read at this level. Like, full stop, point blank, period. Because we know research tells us if you do that, you can do this.
Yes.
And can we do that and still appreciate kind of, you know, context and circumstance in a real rich way while still saying the bar's the bar? Like, can those things work in tandem, or are they always kind of, you know, what is it, indirectly correlated? Is that the proper mathematical term?
I think they can. It's interesting as you were kind of setting up that scenario, so to say. One of the things I kept thinking about is...
this is taking too long. Was that what you were thinking?
No. Not at all.
He's never going to get there.
No. I was thinking about my father saying that we as Black people have kind of learned how to do that.
Okay.
And when we were growing up, he was like, so when you're in a group of white people,
sure,
don't you be using all those,
sure,
you know? And we knew how to work in these systems the way we choose to use our language. And my parents were always when you're in this context, this is what you need to be. So we got that kind of learning. So how do you teach white kids to do that?
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, because I never heard of equity yes, I'm now creating a situation where you can act more like me. I've never thought about equity that way.
Right.
But that's exactly what equity is.
Right. It's always
I didn't just come to work and be who I was at home. I had to be somebody that could go to work.
Sure. Well, because it's proximity to what? It's sort of, I mean, the archetype of how this country was built was straight white Christian male. Your closeness to those things determines, you know, and it determines your like fitting in-ness, for lack of a better term, right?
Yes. No, and it does. And then trying to figure out, so how do we translate, when I think about what my dad was telling me, that into everyday life and education? Because I think I've been able to be successful because of that.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, that's right.
I think about the most successful Black people having to, like, all of the skills that they're using to be successful were created out of necessity due to survival.
That's right.
All the skills that I use, all my soft skills, they were created out of necessity for survival in my circumstances when I had no other choice but to be the person that people needed me to be. Because I think about high school all the time. It was Orange County is something, a race riot when I was there in high school. But it was like, I had to do the
breeze right past that one.
Yeah, race riot. So we had
ran right by it.
They canceled the Black History Month program because the kids were getting death threats. Like, no way. It was a bad time.
In what, 2010?
It was either like, I want to say it was like a Trayvon Martin, like,
sure, 2012.
A couple of people it was a lot going on. We were having Black History Month programs. We were doing like the hands up, don't shoot. My county did not like that.
No.
So they started sending, we were out of school for like a week for bomb threats.
I was at Montpelier during August 17th, and there was like Klan flyers.
And so, you know, and being the person that I was, I'm one of the only people in my level of AB course, like, you begin to assimilate at such a speed. You begin to assimilate at such a light speed because
showing up in Birkenstocks and you're just like, I'm out here. I'm out of here.
A survival.
Sure.
For survival. Because and you know, it's hard, but I try to forgive myself for the things I had to do to survive when other people, because I didn't want to be a person who didn't survive. And by survive, I don't mean you're dead. But I do mean, that I knew if I didn't do this, that my options would be few and far between. So I had to do this, or my options would be few and far between. So I did those things.
Right. And you stand out
at the
already.
detriment to others, I guess, because those other kids did it.
They did.
To get ahead, I need to get ahead, and that's how I got ahead.
Well, and it's also unfortunate, I think, that now we're living in a world of things being taken away from me, if I could put it that way. You know, the white man, white culture thinks that they're being erased.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Right, sure.
People keep talking about that 2030
That's right.
racial movement.
That's right. That's right.
And because of that, versus saying how much richer your life would be.
That's right. That's right. Give me 2030. Everybody's looking like
me. Everybody's giving. They're saying 2030 price. I don't know what's going on.
I'm ahead of the game. Just come on with
it. My family is behind.
Come on. I don't burn. I don't we're good.
We keeping it in the family.
We're cool.
But that's what's gonna make it tougher now.
Sure.
Because we live in a world now where there's just like, you're taking all this away from me.
That's right.
I'm losing power. I'm losing that. And how do you change those mindsets in a world that is continuing to promote that?
Yeah, and a world that is sort of continually, we have. Someone had a great quote that was like, in earlier times, people thought that everyone was less educated because they lacked access to information, and I was like, I can strongly say that is not the case. Like, we know empirically that is now not what happened. That's not what's going on.
We can give you the world, and you still not.
We were wrong about that hypothesis.
Some of us aren't built to educate. I'm just gonna I don't know if I'm built to educate. I'm so happy for the people who are, and I don't mean like in school. I mean like in the public sphere. I don't know if I'm the person that's like, well, let's sit down and let's. This is wrong because. Like, I'm just like, I don't know. Can you? I don't know who I can. Maybe I can point y'all in somebody's direction.
Yeah, I'll give you some resources.
But I can't.
Google it, man.
I can't sit here and there's a quote and I forget who it's by. It was like the byproduct of racism is that you sit around, arguing people for why you deserve to exist.
Sure.
Yes.
It's not about forward progress. You fighting racism is the idea of working towards arguing with people why you should exist.
Right.
And it puts your work, it stops your work.
Yeah.
It stops your forward progress. Because all you're ever doing is telling people why you deserve to be in this space. And it's just like, I can't give too much more energy to it. I'm just going to have to keep living.
I mean, that's what our jobs are.
Yeah.
My job is to convince people that black kids should learn to read.
Yep, top
at its most basic
You're the top
level.
dog over there.
But like that's the job. That is by and large a ludicrous proposition. Right? And I think to your point is like, have we, and I don't mean we, but I think that like has the system of education become like a little too polite in that sense, right? Of saying like, well, okay, we tried our best, instead of being like, this whole thing is backwards.
That's
right.
It's bad.
And we've got to redesign what this whole thing is, because in every era, as things change, the people who get hurt the most are the people who need the most help, right?
Yeah.
Like the suburban kids aren't getting left behind, right? Kids in Forest Lakes North aren't getting left behind, So it just continues to stack and stack and stack and stack. So how I think, we talk about this all the time. It's like, how do we as practitioners and experts and people with experience, is there a point where we're like, look, we've been a little too genial for a little too long, and we're not going to put anybody's head on a stake, but we have to have an honest conversation about like, what is the deal, right? And how have we gotten to this place,
right,
where everyone's kind of like, there's a lot of that. It's like, it's not great.
But
because you gritted teeth.
This is
not good.
I don't know about that. And then you're like,
none of this is any good.
It is. And then you're like, oh, where do your kids go to school? They're like, Covenant. I'm like, well, come on, man. Right?
You're reminding me of, and again, before integration, those teachers. My father went to a one-room schoolhouse, and he talked about that the expectations from those teachers was
through the roof, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
And it was like, you're not leaving this desk until you read this to me. And, he just talked, and then it didn't stop in the schoolhouse.
That's right. Then
you went to the church, and someone said, I heard you didn't finish your homework.
Like, boy, you better sit down.
You better sit down. And that's exactly right. It was not that politeness, like, oh,
But it was also reinforced in multiple different
things. You know, it was reinforced in the school. It was reinforced in your home, because when your mom or dad or grandmom or uncle, your big brother, anybody that was related to you came to pick you up from that school, that teacher says, this is what he needs to do when he gets home.
That's right.
And, you know, then you sit in church and in Sunday school, and they say, I heard you're not here. Read this out loud.
That's right.
You know?
That's right.
And so it was just, do you know what a gift?
Yeah, sure.
You know, and that's the way my dad, like, looked at education, is this was such a gift for me that if I was going to make it in this world, I had to take advantage of every learning experience that came my way. And I think he kind of brought us up that way in all, you know, and they didn't have, because, you know, they were educators by default, to be honest, you know, because of their age and the time. Dad talked about wanting to be a dentist. My mother wanted to be an interior designer. So my dad was a science teacher. My mother was a home ec teacher, you know, because at that time, that was the extent of what they could do with, you know, having those opportunities to be able to do that. But when they got old enough, you know, my father, like, went back, got a master's degree, did administration. He was determined that he was a learner from day one to day two. And he died very young. Never really got a chance to maybe even do half of the stuff I think he would have loved to do. And my mother did all this stuff. She was creative. She still taught. She started, you know, sewing and fixing and doing that and finding ways, because that was the kind of way the two of them worked. You know. Anyway.
Are you giving me the look? Or you
No. You, don't do that.
I'm just saying.
Price always acting like I'm giving him a look.
She does. She tries to. She'll be like hustling me out of here. We'll be talking, and then all of a sudden you'll see her like.
One thing about me is that I love, like, I have time anxiety, which I know is a Western, like, time, being on time, being late. That's a Westernized concept, but it's like, when I tell somebody to be somewhere, I need you to be there. And also, when I tell you I'm going to be there, I'm going to be there. So time is like, you can't keep these people here longer than we said we was going to keep them, Price. But Price be like, we've been 30 minutes over. We still over here time. And I'd be like this. She'll just close up and stand up. She'll just be like, I've stood up before. Like this. Well, you close it out there.
That's fine. We'll be all right.
No, that's not it.
We'll be good.
I just love this kind of conversation, you know. And we could probably talk for another hour or so.
No, I get him. I stand up. So he know what that means.
That's fine. I'm ready. I'm ready at the controls. I don't know what to tell you.
It's okay. I hear you. You.
Fine. Let's get out of here then. Thank you. Big thank you to Valerie for joining us. And again, if you have ideas for the show, want to get in touch with us, check us out on all social platforms, United Way Cville and at City of Promise, or drop us a note at unitedwaycville.org. Are there ways people can keep up with you or follow your work or the organizations you're involved with? Is there any anything you want to just sort of plug for our last minute here?
Well, you know, I'm retired, but I'm always about helping young people. And I love working with the Ron Brown Scholarship Foundation.
Absolutely.
Because it's all focused on African American students.
That's right. We've had Mike on the show too. He's somewhere, sometime.
Right.
Yeah.
And because it's like, oh shoot, I can finally take everything that I've learned being everywhere.
Yes.
And hopefully help these young African American students, because most of them are going to big PWIs, Ivy League schools.
That's right.
To be able to make sure their voice is being heard.
Yeah.
And that they're not being ignored or invisible, and that they're being seen.
That's great.
And that's what I'll always do with these young people.
Yeah.
I want to be sure people who look like me are being seen.
Yeah. Another great organization, Ron Brown, of course, United Way Greater Charlottesville, City of Promise. So if you're thinking about your ho-ho holiday philanthropy, those are some great places to park some time, talent, and treasure. We get support on the show from the folks at the United Way. And, of course, if you like what you hear, share with your friends. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Again, this is our last episode of the year, so everyone have a happy, safe holiday season. Whatever you're celebrating this year, we'll be back in 2025. Marky's doing the intro. More of her, less of me. Good for the show, good for everyone. Yay. For Valerie and Marky, this is Price. See you next week.
Next year.
See you next year. And have a happy New Year.
Happy New Year.